The autumn leaves scattered across the courtyard of Westlake Middle School as students boarded the yellow buses for their annual trip to the Natural History Museum in downtown Chicago. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter as Principal Garrett checked off names on his clipboard. "Everyone's accounted for, Mrs. Peterson," he said to the 8th grade science teacher who stood by the bus door, ushering students aboard. Sarah Peterson nodded, her eyes sweeping over the crowd of excited 13-year-olds. "Isabella Martinez?" she called out, searching for the quiet girl with the long dark hair. "Here, Mrs. Peterson." Isabella waved from the back of the line, her navy blue backpack slung over one shoulder. The girl adjusted her red-framed glasses and smiled shyly. "I have my permission slip right here." Mrs. Peterson checked her off the list. "Perfect. Remember to stay with your buddy at all times." The 60-minute drive into the city was filled with chatter and laughter. Isabella sat beside her lab partner, Zoe Winters, near the middle of the bus. The two weren't particularly close, but they worked well together in class. Isabella was more reserved, preferring books to social media, while Zoe was outgoing and popular. "I can't wait to see the new paleontology exhibit," Isabella said, flipping through the museum brochure she'd printed at home. Her enthusiasm for science was one of the few things that brought her out of her shell. Zoe nodded, only half listening as she texted her friends. "Yeah, cool." At the museum, Mrs. Peterson divided the students into groups of 4, assigning each group a section to explore and report on. Isabella was grouped with Zoe, Tyler Chen, and Marcus Washington. "We'll meet back at the Grand Hall at noon for lunch," Mrs. Peterson instructed. "No wandering off alone. Understood?" The morning progressed smoothly. The groups moved through the vast museum, taking notes and photos for their assignments. It wasn't until lunch, when the students gathered in the Grand Hall, that anyone noticed something was wrong. "Where's Isabella?" Mrs. Peterson asked, scanning the crowd as students unpacked their lunches. Zoe looked up from her phone. She said she was going to the bathroom. "That was like 20 minutes ago, though." Mrs. Peterson's brow furrowed. "Tyler, Marcus, did either of you see her after that?" Both boys shook their heads. "She was acting weird earlier," Zoe added, putting her phone down. "Like she kept checking her phone and seemed distracted." A cold feeling settled in Mrs. Peterson's stomach. She immediately alerted the museum security, who initiated a search of the building. Within an hour, when Isabella still hadn't been found, the police were called. Detective James Reeves arrived with his partner, Detective Sophia Lynn. They questioned each student and teacher, starting with Isabella's group. "Did she mention anything unusual? Any problems at home or at school?" Detective Lynn asked Zoe. "Not really. I mean, she's pretty quiet usually, but—" Zoe hesitated. "She did mention something about finally finding answers. I thought she was talking about some science thing she was into." Security footage showed Isabella entering the bathroom at 11:42 a.m. At 11:47 a.m., she exited and walked purposefully toward the east wing of the museum. The cameras lost her after that, a blind spot in the museum's surveillance system. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and there had been no activity on her social media accounts. By evening, Isabella's disappearance had made the local news. Her parents, Carlos and Elena Martinez, appeared on camera, their faces etched with desperation. "Por favor, Isabella, come home," her mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Whatever is wrong, we can fix it together." Carlos Martinez, his voice breaking, addressed whoever might be watching. "If someone has our daughter, please. She is everything to us." As days turned into weeks, Isabella's face became familiar across Chicago and surrounding states. Her school photo, showing a serious girl with intelligent eyes behind red glasses, appeared on posters, billboards, and news segments. The investigation revealed little. Isabella was a good student with no history of running away. Her internet search history showed nothing alarming, just research for school projects and some searches about colleges with strong science programs, ambitious for a 13-year-old. At school, a memorial of sorts formed around Isabella's locker. Students left notes, small gifts, and flowers. Mrs. Peterson passed it daily, the sight of it a constant reminder of her failure to keep her students safe. As autumn turned to winter, the media attention waned. The police had exhausted their leads. Isabella Martinez had seemingly vanished without a trace, becoming another statistic in the database of missing children. But Mrs. Peterson couldn't let go. Every night, she replayed that day in her mind, searching for something she might have missed. And every morning, she looked at Isabella's empty desk, promising silently that she wouldn't give up until she found the truth. Winter in Chicago brought bitter winds that swept through the nearly empty corridors of Westlake Middle School during winter break. In the teacher's lounge, Sarah Peterson sat alone, surrounded by stacks of papers, not student assignments, but printouts of news articles, police reports, and maps she'd marked with red pen. "Sarah, you need to give yourself a break," said Principal Garrett, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of her. "It's Christmas Eve. You should be home with David and the kids." Sarah pushed her graying hair from her face. "David's taking them to his parents for dinner. I told them I'd join later." She gestured to the papers. "I keep thinking that we're missing something, Tom. Isabella didn't just disappear into thin air." Tom Garrett sighed and sat across from her. At 58, he'd been an educator for over 30 years, and the disappearance of Isabella Martinez had hit him harder than he let on. "The police have done everything they can. Sarah, Detective Reeves calls me weekly with updates, or lack thereof." "That's just it," Sarah said, pulling out a map of the museum. "I've been going over this. There's that blind spot in the security footage, but it's near an emergency exit. If Isabella left through that door, she would have triggered an alarm. Unless someone disabled it," Tom said quietly. Sarah looked up sharply. "You think someone took her?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Tom sipped his coffee. "But Isabella was a smart kid. If she was planning to run away, she chose the perfect moment, in a crowded place with multiple exits and limited supervision." Sarah shook her head. "But why?" "Her parents said everything was normal at home. Her grades were excellent. She had plans for the future. Sometimes the kids who seem the most put together are hiding the most pain," Tom replied, his voice heavy with experience. After the holidays, school resumed with a somber air. Isabella's absence was a wound that wouldn't heal. Her classmates had processed the disappearance in different ways. Some, like Zoe, became withdrawn. Others sought information, starting amateur investigation clubs that the school reluctantly allowed under teacher supervision, seeing it as a way for students to process their grief and fear. In February, the Martinez family held a community vigil marking 3 months since Isabella's disappearance. Hundreds attended, including Mrs. Peterson and many of Isabella's classmates. Elena Martinez, her face thinner now, dark circles under her eyes, thanked everyone for their continued support. "We haven't given up hope," she said, her accent thicker with emotion. "Wherever Isabella is, we pray she is safe, and we pray she knows how much we love her and miss her." Detective Reeves attended as well, standing at the back of the crowd. Mrs. Peterson approached him after the ceremony. "Any news?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He shook his head. "Nothing solid. We've followed up on over 200 tips, but none have panned out." He hesitated. "Mrs. Peterson, I have to be honest with you. The longer this goes on—" "I know," she interrupted, not wanting to hear the statistics about missing children and diminishing odds of recovery. "But Isabella isn't a statistic." "No, she isn't," he agreed, "and we haven't closed the case, but resources are limited and new cases come in every day." As winter slowly gave way to spring, life at Westlake attempted to return to normal. The memorial around Isabella's locker gradually diminished, though no one had the heart to remove the remaining items. The school counselor continued to work with students affected by the disappearance, particularly those in Isabella's class. Mrs. Peterson threw herself into her teaching, but also continued her own investigation. She interviewed students again, particularly focusing on the weeks before the field trip. She created a timeline on her home office wall, mapping Isabella's last known movements and communications. One evening in late April, she received a call from Zoe Winter's mother. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm sorry to call so late, but Zoe just told me something that might be important." Her voice was tense. She said that the day before the field trip, she saw Isabella talking to someone in a car outside the school. She didn't think anything of it at the time, but now she's wondering if she should have told the police. Sarah's heart raced. Did she recognize the person? Or the car? She said it was a dark sedan, maybe blue or black. She couldn't see the driver clearly, but she thought it was a woman. Isabella seemed agitated after the conversation, Zoe said. Sarah immediately contacted Detective Reeves with the information. The next day, he interviewed Zoe at the school, but without a license plate or better description of the driver. It was another dead end. As the school year wound down, the administration faced a difficult decision. Isabella's locker had remained untouched, but school policy required all lockers to be emptied and cleaned at year's end. "We should contact the Martinez family first," Mrs. Peterson insisted during a staff meeting. "They might want to collect her things." Principal Garrett nodded. "Of course, I'll call them this afternoon." But when he did, Carlos Martinez's response surprised him. We can't do it, Mr. Garrett. We've been through so much. To see her things, her handwriting." His voice broke. "Perhaps Mrs. Peterson could do it?" Isabella trusted her. And so, on the last day of school, after the students had been dismissed for summer break, Sarah Peterson stood before locker Subca 237 with a cardboard box and the master key. She took a deep breath, inserted the key, and turned it. The metal door of Isabella's locker swung open with a creak that echoed in the empty hallway. Mrs. Peterson stared at the contents, frozen in time since that October morning 6 months ago. Textbooks were neatly arranged on the top shelf. A small magnetic mirror hung on the inside of the door, surrounded by a few photos. Isabella with her parents at a science fair, Isabella and a group of girls from summer camp, a faded picture of what appeared to be her grandparents in Mexico. Mrs. Peterson carefully removed each item, placing them in the cardboard box. A blue sweater hung on a hook, a pair of gym shoes, folders organized by subject with Isabella's neat handwriting labeling each one. Everything spoke of a methodical, organized student. As she removed the books from the shelf, something fluttered to the floor, a folded piece of paper that had been tucked between 2 textbooks. Mrs. Peterson picked it up, unfolding it to discover a handwritten letter. "Dear Mrs. Peterson, if you're reading this, then I've successfully left. I'm sorry for any worry I've caused, but I had to do this. I've discovered something about myself and my family that changes everything. I can't explain more now, but please know that I'm safe and this was my choice. Please tell my parents I love them, but I need time." Isabella Sarah's hands trembled as she read the note again. This wasn't a random disappearance or an abduction. Isabella had planned to leave. But what had she discovered, and where had she gone? At the bottom of the locker, tucked in the corner, was a small agenda book. Sarah opened it, flipping through the pages. Most entries were school-related, assignment due dates, test reminders, but as she reached the weeks before Isabella's disappearance, she noticed a pattern. Small notations appeared. CR 430 and Library Research, CR Files. The last entry, on the day before the field trip, simply read, "Confirmed, it's true, tomorrow is the day." Sarah immediately called Detective Reeves, who arrived at the school within the hour. He examined the letter and agenda carefully. "This changes everything," he said. "She left voluntarily, but these notations, CR, do you have any idea what that might stand for?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Not off the top of my head. A person's initials, maybe? Or a place." She continued to sort through the locker's contents, now with renewed purpose. At the bottom of the box was Isabella's science binder. Mrs. Peterson opened it, expecting to find notes from class, but instead discovered newspaper clippings and printouts of articles. They all related to one story: the conviction of a woman named Catherine Reynolds for embezzlement from a children's charity 5 years ago. Catherine Reynolds had been sentenced to 7 years in prison. "CR," Sarah breathed, Catherine Reynolds. Detective Reeves took the articles, scanning them quickly. Why would Isabella be researching an embezzlement case from 5 years ago? Sarah continued looking through the binder and found a folded document tucked into the back pocket. A birth certificate. But not Isabella's. This certificate was for a baby girl named Sophia Reynolds, born to Catherine Reynolds and David Martinez 14 years ago in Boston. David Martinez, Sarah said. That's Isabella's father's name. Detective Reeves stared at the document. We need to talk to the Martinez family. Now. Within hours, they were sitting in the living room of the Martinez home. Elena sat rigidly on the couch, while Carlos paced the room. Detective Reeves had explained their discovery and shown them the birth certificate and letter. "Is this true, Mr. Martinez?" Detective Reeves asked. "Did you have a child with Catherine Reynolds?" Carlos stopped pacing. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "It was before I met Elena. Catherine and I were together in Boston for almost 2 years. When Sophia was born, she wasn't ready to be a mother. She had career ambitions, and a baby didn't fit into her plans. She gave me full custody when Sophia was 6 months old." "Sophia," Sarah repeated. "Isabella is Sophia?" Carlos nodded. "I changed her name when we moved to Chicago. I met Elena when Isabella, Sophia, was 2. We married when she was 4. Elena is the only mother she's ever known." Elena spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "We never told her she was adopted. We thought it would be easier this way." Detective Reeves leaned forward. "But how did she find out? And why would this make her run away?" Carlos ran a hand through his hair. "About 8 months ago, Isabella needed a birth certificate for a science camp application. She must have found the original one in my office while looking for it. And then she started researching Catherine. The woman in the car," Sarah realized. Zoe saw Isabella talking to a woman in a car outside the school the day before she disappeared. It must have been Catherine Reynolds. "But Catherine Reynolds is in prison," Detective Reeves pointed out. "No," Carlos said, his voice hollow. "She was released early about 1 year ago. Good behavior. She contacted me shortly after, wanting to see Isabella. I refused. I was afraid of losing my daughter." Understanding dawned on Sarah. So Isabella discovered she was adopted, found her birth mother, and arranged to meet her during the field trip. "We have to find Catherine Reynolds," Detective Reeves said, standing up. "Do you have any contact information for her?" Carlos shook his head. "Just an email address she used to contact me." Detective Reeves immediately put out an alert for Catherine Reynolds and began tracking her through last known addresses and contacts. Within days, they had a lead. Catherine had been living in Milwaukee and working at a community college library. When police arrived at her apartment, they found it empty, but neighbors confirmed she had been living there with a teenage girl for the past several months. They had left abruptly just days earlier. The investigation now focused on tracking Catherine's movements. Her credit card had been used at a gas station in Indianapolis the previous week. Surveillance footage confirmed it was her, and with her was Isabella, looking healthy but different, her hair cut short and dyed a lighter color. A week later, Detective Reeves called Mrs. Peterson with news. "We found them in Louisville, Kentucky. Isabella is safe. Catherine Reynolds has been taken into custody on charges of interfering with parental custody." "And Isabella?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "She's being brought back to Chicago tonight. Her parents are flying down to accompany her home." The reunion at O'Hare Airport was captured by news cameras. A family torn apart, now piecing itself back together. Isabella, looking thinner and more mature than when she'd disappeared, embraced her parents with visible emotion. The image was on every local news station that night. 2 days later, Mrs. Peterson received a call from Elena Martinez. "Isabella would like to see you if you're willing." That afternoon, Sarah visited the Martinez home. Isabella sat in the living room, her hands folded in her lap. Her red glasses were gone, replaced by contact lenses, and her short hair gave her a more grown-up appearance. "Mrs. Peterson," she said, standing when Sarah entered. "Thank you for coming." Sarah embraced her former student, tears springing to her eyes. "I'm so glad you're safe." Isabella. They sat together, and Isabella explained what had happened. After discovering her adoption, she had become obsessed with learning about her birth mother. Using the school computers and public libraries to avoid leaving a search history at home, she had tracked down Catherine Reynolds and made contact through social media. "She told me she had changed, that prison had given her time to reflect on her mistakes," Isabella said. "She said she regretted giving me up more than anything. She showed me letters she had written to me over the years, letters my dad never gave me." Isabella had arranged to meet Catherine during the field trip, slipping away when the museum was at its most crowded. Catherine had taken her to Milwaukee, where they had lived quietly while Catherine worked, and Isabella took online classes under a different name. "I know what I did was wrong," Isabella said, her voice small. "I hurt so many people, but I felt like my whole life had been a lie. I needed to know who I really was." "And did you find out?" Sarah asked gently. Isabella nodded slowly. "I think so. Catherine, my birth mother, she loves me in her way, but she's still unstable. She would make plans and change them suddenly. She would promise things and forget. When I realized she wanted to take me even further away, to start over in Mexico where we couldn't be found, I knew I had to come home." She looked toward the kitchen, where her parents were giving them privacy. "They're my real family, they've always been. I just couldn't see it before." The legal consequences were complicated. Catherine Reynolds faced criminal charges, but Isabella's status as a willing participant and her subsequent desire to return home mitigated some of the case against her birth mother. The Martinez family began family therapy to heal the wounds of secrets and separation. When school resumed in the fall, Isabella returned to Westlake, now in the 9th grade. The story had made national news, sparking discussions about adoption, disclosure, and the complexities of modern families. Isabella's experience became a case study in school counselor training programs across the country. Mrs. Peterson continued teaching 8th grade science, but her experience had changed her. She became an advocate for open adoption practices and developed a support group for adoptees and their families at the school. One afternoon in late September, almost a year after Isabella's disappearance, she found a note in her faculty mailbox. "Dear Mrs. Peterson, I never thanked you properly for not giving up on me. Dad told me how you kept searching, how you were the one who found the clues in my locker. I'm still figuring things out, but I know one thing for sure. Sometimes the family we need isn't about blood or birth certificates. It's about who's there when it matters most. Thank you for being that person for me. Isabella." And yes, I'm keeping that name. It's mine now. Sarah folded the note carefully and placed it in her wallet, next to a photo of her own children. Outside her classroom window, she could see Isabella sitting with a group of students on the lawn, laughing at something. The girl caught her eye and waved. Sarah waved back, knowing that some mysteries, once solved, revealed truths both painful and healing. Isabella's journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning, but at least now she was walking a path illuminated by truth, rather than shadowed by secrets.